talking about Buck O'Neil. If you don't know who Buck O'Neil is, oh my, it is my pleasure to begin to introduce him to you and to set you on your course to learn more about this incredible human being. Buck O'Neil was a baseball player, a scout, a manager, a coach, a champion for the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, a champion for Negro Leaguers, an ambassador for baseball, and one of the finest human beings that the state of Florida ever produced and that Kansas City ever could host and claim. We do need to do a little bit of biographical timeline business here. Buck is born on the 13th of November, which the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum almost always remembers with special events in the fall. He's born in Carabel, Florida, the second of three children to John Jordan O'Neil and Luella Campbell O'Neil. He will work in the celery fields there, by the way, and his family moves to Sarasota, Florida, and he begins a semi-pro career with the Tigers in that town. In 1924, he was disallowed from attending high school in Sarasota and moves eventually to Jacksonville, attends Edward Waters College. He completes high school and 2 years of college. In 1934, he left Florida and started playing semi-pro baseball. In 1937, he signed with the Memphis Red Sox of the Negro American League. And in 1938, he was traded to the Monarchs, where he played and managed for 14 years. By the way, the Negro Leagues were established in 1920. In 1923, I think it's Ed Bolton's Eastern Colored Leagues is established. And from 1925 to 27, the Eastern Colored League and the National Negro Leagues will square off in what is known as the Colored World Series, or the Negro World Series. In 1943, this is before he goes off to serve in the Navy, he hits for the cycle, and we'll hear him describe that day. And he also meets Ora Lee Owens, his future wife. Serves in the Navy from 43 through 45. And then in 56, this is after his career with the Monarchs, he will become a scout for the Chicago Cubs. And then in 62, becomes a coach for the Cubs. There's a very sad story that showed how backwards and bigoted the whole Major League Baseball was, and the Cubs included. The Cubs had a rotation system for managing. They let their coaches manage, and I don't know why the owner or the general manager wanted it this way, but he decided this way. But if a manager got thrown out of a game, then there was a backup coach, either first base or third base, or somebody else on the bench, that would become the manager for that game. Well, in one of these games, both the designated coach who was managing that day got thrown out of the game. And also, I think another coach was either sick or thrown out. And Buck was next in line. But the owner and or the general manager had determined that he would never set foot on the field. And he was disallowed from even managing. And he would have been the first African-American to manage a professional Major League Baseball game if he'd been allowed to, but he wasn't allowed. In 1981, he becomes part of the Hall of Fame Veterans Committee. This is very important for Negro Leaguers especially. He becomes a scout for the Kansas City Royals in 88. He founds the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum with another wonderful set of folks in Kansas City in 1990. In 1994, Buck explodes upon the national consciousness of the United States through Ken Burns' award-winning baseball series on PBS. The Negro League Baseball Museum moves to its current location down in the 18th and Vine District in 1997. In 2006, he fails by one vote from being voted into the Hall of Fame. And then in the 6th of October, he dies peacefully at Research Hospital. There's a public celebration at Municipal Auditorium and a homegoing service at his home church, Bethel AME. Bethel AME is that church if you're driving north on 71 Highway, the Bruce Watkins Expressway. As you see it, you'll kind of come between two churches, Paseo Baptist Church on your left, and then Bethel AME Church on your right. And the one on the right is was Buck's home church. On December the 7th, Pearl Harbor Day in 2006, he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President Bush, with Buck's brother Warren receiving the posthumous honor in Buck's stead. In 2008, Major League Baseball realized what a grievous error it had made by disallowing him into the Hall of Fame in 2006. And they created the Lifetime Achievement Award and put a Buck O'Neil statue right at the entrance into the hall in Cooperstown. Then on December the 5th, just last December, Major League Baseball announced that Buck had been elected to the Hall of Fame. And then this past July 24th, the induction ceremony for Buck was held in Cooperstown. There's a statue of Buck that also highlights the Buck O'Neil Lifetime Achievement Award, honoring an individual whose extraordinary efforts to enhance baseball's positive impact on society have broadened the game's appeal and whose character, integrity, and dignity are comparable to Buck O'Neil's. And it is a wonderful thing there. And I think the plaque is a better plaque, and now he's in the Hall of Fame, and the plaque is a better likeness than the statue at the Cooperstown. And I think it's a better likeness, although the statue at the Negro Leagues is great. And this is Buck behind home plate, looking through the fence with the real Buck O'Neil having his hand on the statue's shoulder. But on the right is the plaque in Cooperstown that now has traveled to Kansas City over the weekend. And as Ray was telling us before we began, is safely has been curated back to Cooperstown, where it will be put back up on the wall. I want to do some summing up here before we take some questions. And Ray Doswell may have many more comments we should feel free to ask him about this. We've got a Sunday school class full of folks at First Christian Church that Liz is overseeing, and other people that have chimed in and dialed in to this moment. I want to suggest that song, "The Greatest Thing in All My Life is Loving You," is the theme really by which to understand Buck, and that he lived a life of love first by dismissing the option of bitterness. This is what makes him a great soul. He had every right to be bitter, but he didn't find much reason to be so. He consistently dismissed the option to be bitter about anything or anyone. And this is so in the degradation of segregation in Florida. He didn't get bitter. He got better as a baseball player, and he got out of the celery field overalls and into a baseball uniform. When he didn't get to play in the show, that's the nickname for all of you people who don't know about baseball, having only ever played in the Negro Leagues, he didn't express bitterness. No, he dismissed bitterness and worked to get others into the game, and then later Negro Leaguers into the Hall of Fame. At Cooperstown, on the glass behind his statue, just beyond the entrance to the National Baseball Hall of Fame, there's a statement of Buck's, and if you'd move to the next slide, we will see that statement. "Waste no tears for me. I didn't come along too early. I was right on time," and thus the title of his autobiography. So, secondly, next slide. Buck lived a life of love by delighting in the daily, the seemingly mundane. He would never regard anybody he met as beneath him or lower than himself. He would do just as Jesus did, simply calling them, literally anyone who greeted him around the town, his friends. And he said when he wasn't voted into the Hall of Fame in 2006, he was still in the Hall of Fame of Friends and Friendship in Kansas City. His attention to the daily, go back to the dailies. Yeah, delighting the day, sorry. His attention to the daily and his devotion to the loveliness in the ordinary was most clearly evident in his relationship with Ora Lee. Buck loved Ora Lee with devotion and dedication when she was discriminated against in downtown Kansas City stores, when she tried to shop for a hat, and he loved her with fierce loyalty and a special grace when she contracted cancer. As the Kansas City Star reported, Buck would call her years of fighting that disease the greatest 15 years of my life. They were the greatest because the sacred dailiness they shared together, such as the cherished meals in their home, especially when they had company, and she treated everyone like royalty. What was special to Buck was not the mounting acclaim that was accruing to his reputation and presence in Kansas City and across the nation, but it was the house and home and life he shared with Ora Lee in all of its dailiness that were the greatest graces and his best blessings. Above and beyond dismissing the option of bitterness and delighting in the daily, Buck lived a life of love by daring to love others first. And the next slide, please. We were privileged to host Buck at Community Christian Church, where I was pastor for about a little bit over 3 decades, on numerous occasions at a stake cookout sponsored by the Men's Fellowship during a Christians offering love to overcome racism Juneteenth celebration, at a Martin Luther King interfaith service. He always came dressed impeccably and ready to go with a huge smile on his face. He always seemed interested in your welfare and what you were doing. He'd have a quick quip or two, but he was genuinely interested in what was going on with you. This was even true at the end of Buck's life, when his strength was ebbing away and when he had lost much of his zip and most of his pizzazz. Even then, he expressed his love for others. Emmanuel Cleaver recalled for me how when he went to see Buck at Research Hospital, 2 days before he died, he could hardly get Buck to talk about his medical situation. Instead, Buck turned the tables on Emmanuel and asked about his children. How's Evan doing? And is E3 preaching at St. James now? Is he really preaching there? In the midst of his in extremis predicament, he dared to love others first, to call attention to their lives, to be concerned about the welfare of others over and above his own welfare. He had the ability, Emmanuel recalled, he had the ability to reserve thinking about himself and express care for others first. And in this regard, I can't help but think of the text out of John's Gospel. No one has greater love than this, than to lay down one's life for one's friends. When I told Emmanuel about that text and how it came to my mind, he said, "Oh yeah, that's him. That's Buck, all right." So those are the 3 ways. Next slide, just to sum up. He lived a life of love by dismissing the option of bitterness, by delighting in the daily or what is seemingly mundane, and he dared to love others first before anything else. By the way, one other scriptural text that needs to be cited is one that was cited at the Hall of Fame induction ceremony when, is it Dr. Taylor Ray that did the introduction? Angela Taylor.
Terry.
Dr. Angela Terry did the introduction, and she cited this scripture, and this embodies also Buck's spirit. We rejoice in our sufferings. This is from Romans 5. We rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope, and hope does not disappoint us. And that was Buck all over the place. That was Buck's, that's how he lived, and that's who he was. Let's go to the next slide. So from the Monarchs, through the Cubs, through an ambassador for baseball, through the founder of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, through the person whose spirit hovers over the minor league team, the Kansas City Monarchs, in our own backyard, and now in the Hall of Fame. As he said, and as we can echo, he's always been and always will be in our Hall of Fame of friendship in our hearts here in Kansas City.